Hello and welcome to Model Engineers Laser. My name is Holly and this is part 5 of our jack build. From the last time we posted, I've actually given the frames a coat of paint, hence the white tablecloth, because black frames don't show on a black table very easily, so I've just put the cloth on there for you to see. Just going through and explaining to you what I've painted them with, because you don't actually need to see me paint. The frames have had this grey primer put on them first as a first coat, and then for the top coat they've had just a Halfords Satin black spray paint because they're not going to get particularly hot. And then we had great fun just trying to find the right shade of red. It's just a BMW Bright Red from Halfords again on the frames. At the same time as painting the frames, I've also done the wheels, both sides, and done those in black. I've also done the cranks. Now, I'm not sure what primer would have been safe to use on the wheels because they're nickel plated, so not being 100% certain if this primer would have worked on them, we've used an acid etch primer. We know for certain the cranks are made out of brass, so they definitely need the acid etch primer. Get my words out. So I've just done them at the same time to make sure that they were going to stand the test of time. One of the instructions later on talks about removing the paint from inside the bushes. I've made myself a little bit easier with life, and I'll show you how we did that. It was by rolling. Is that focus? There we go. There's the focus on the camera. This is a bit of masking tape and just rolled up and inserted into the crank there, which prevents the paint going down into the hole. And that's exactly the same process as that I did on the bushes, but I just used bits of scrap newspaper, rolled up really tightly and wedged in there to stop the paint going down. You can see on there, it's the red and black just because of how the newspaper sat as I was painting them, depending from the different sides, and covered up from masking tape. By the time the crank sat on there, you're not going to see it anyway, but it's just important there's no paint on the inside. So save yourself a little bit of trouble, just stick a little bit of tape in there to give you a little bit less work to do later after painting. We're now following the instructions from Roundhouse about putting in our axles with the wheels on and then putting the cranks on afterward. Now, you want to make sure that the axles flow freely through the bushes still before you get started. And we're starting with the rear of the loco. Yeah, they flow through nicely. We're starting with the rear of the loco. I'm going to do slightly different to what the instructions say because Roundhouse say that you want to put your axle on and then put your wheels on and while they're through the middle. So they're saying put your axle through, put both your wheels through, making sure that this section's on the inside. So the next one that you would put on would be the other way around, and then go through the other side, then put the cranks on. But because these flow really nicely, I think it's going to get really frustrating. And they're just going to slide out. I mean, if they just slide out, I'm going to get really frustrated. So I'm going to cheat and put one of the cranks on first. So because we're working at the back of the loco, there are two types of cranks. There's the outside crank with a pin fitted, and then there's a plain one. The ones with the pins go at the back, so those are the ones that we're going to be working with first. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see better. There you go. So these are the ones that go on the front, and these are the ones that go on the back. Because we're going on the back first, we're going to start with those. Now, the cranks are squared, and so are the ends of the axles. Can you see that there? No, it's got a square. That's to allow for quartering when you get to the stage of putting your next axle. So they should slot on nicely, and then they don't spin in the axles, which is what we want because that's how the wheels are going to be driven around. So we've wedged that on nice and tightly, and you want to make sure that they're nice and flush up there. And take one of the screws that come in the kit. So they are 4BA countersunk steel screws. and they are going to go in there, and I want a screwdriver. I'm only doing things not really tight, loosely tight, to get an idea, and also we're going to test it all and make sure that it sits nice and flat and smooth when on a rolling road later. So by putting the crank on the end there, it's just going to stop everything sliding off while I'm trying to work on it. It gives me something to hold on to. I wouldn't say that I'm particularly clumsy and heavy-fingered, quite the opposite, but I do like an easy life. So I've put both of those on there, and that fits through there. Oh, it goes round, makes me happy. Okay, I'll stop smiling at my frame and carry on showing you what you need to do next. So we're still working with the cranks with the pins on, and this is where we're going to talk about quartering. So conventionally, your right hand crank, this is upside down, so I know it's on the left, but it would be our right, should be the leading crank. So this one needs to be 90 degrees, so a quarter revolution in front of the left one. So remember, we're working backwards because the frame is upside down. So by having this upright rather than on a side position, we've got it upright. We know this one needs to be in front of it. I'm going to turn it around so you can see, because I think it's going to get confusing otherwise. I can see. Spread those out a bit, it'll balance a bit better. So put it the right way around as well. Hopefully, can you see that there? Lovely. So this here is our left hand crank. This one is going to be the right hand one. It needs to be forward, so to go drive your engine forward, it's going to go in this motion. Yes, if you're looking at it from that angle, it's going anti-clockwise. So we're going to have that in an upright position there with the pin at the top. And then this one, I'm going to turn 90 degrees and sit on the other square end there. So it needs a little bit of persuasion. There we go, that's on. So now it's almost not very square. It does suggest doing this in a vise, but of course I haven't got a vise here. I'm just trying to show you. There you go, that's on there. So that is set at quarter of a turn ahead. So this is up, that's forward. This one's down, this one's forward. So that's how we're going to drive around. We need to now put the other screw in this side. Again, we're not going to do it overly tight. Now we need to do the front axle. The same principle as before, really. We want to put on the cranks onto the end of the axles, onto the square heads, and screw them on. Again, not overly tight. And now we're working on the front. Let's spread those parts, stop it rocking about a bit. In through the one wheel, making sure that's the right way, and the same again for this one. And then out through the other side. At this point, you need to make sure, again, like that side, that your cranks are quartered appropriately. So it doesn't have to be in line with this, but it might help you remember which way, if you know you've got those right, to set those up so one's up and one sideways, and then match them, just so you know you have got them the right way round. They don't need to be in line at the moment because they're going to roll around anyway. We're not putting the rods or anything on them yet, but that way you know that your right hand side, again we're working backwards here, I should turn it around again, So our right hand side is our leading one, so that goes over first. See, it's harder to see without the cranks pins on like the back. And then time for our final screw on the cranks. There we go. Spread them out and it's starting to look. There we go. And there we have it. It's all screwed up very loosely, and I haven't tightened those up. Now, it does say in the instructions about checking the side move. You see how that wiggles when you just apply a little bit of pressure? In the instructions, it says that if you have an excessive, I mean, you don't want it to be tight, it needs to run, but that going around a track is going to ruin your cylinders. So if it has an excess of wiggle room, I don't know the better word for it, they do supply some washers to say put them on the right hand side, which is your leading side on your cranks, just to take up that space. Now, as with Roundhouse, they do put everything in the kit for you, so they supply the washers to do it. However, I am a little bit of a perfectionist. You may not believe it. When you put those washers behind the cranks, if I do it on there, you're going to see it better. I'm just going to line it up how it would sit. I've just spent ages making it all pretty and painting it, and you can see the washer behind the crank. It's fine, it will work, it will do the job, and you probably won't see it in that much detail, but I'll know it's there and it'll annoy me. So I'm not going to use these washers. I'm just going to ask Ed to make me a few more that are a little bit smaller, or just get some more that are a little bit smaller, to take up that strain, that slack there, but also to the point that you can't see. Now we're going to set the gauges on our wheels, and it's going to be easier to do this with it upside down. So I'm pushing that way because I've got an imaginary washer there that I'm going to put in at a later date. So start by turning your, let me see if I can zoom in so you can see a little bit better. You want your grub screws facing the same direction to give you ease of access to tighten them up. And then Roundhouse give a little gauge plate. So I'm making mine 32mm gauge, not the 45, so I'm doing the narrower one. Same principles apply. So, trick here is to make sure you're ambidextrous, and I'm right-handed, so put my tools on the right-hand side. Wedge your gauge plate in. I would say just tuck it behind your grub screws, because then you've got access to them. While you're pinching that, you want to measure these gaps to see that they're equal. So that is 7mm. That's 5mm, so they probably need to be more 6mm. And 6mm, so I'm holding that there because of my imaginary washer holding it in place for me. They're perfect gauge apart and they're equally apart. So now I'm just going to tighten up. Excuse me. Tighten up. I'm only pinching them tight for now because once I've made sure I've got them right, I'm going to put a little flat on my axles to make sure that they sit tighter. There we go. And that. And my wheel set. I'm going to repeat it for the bottom down here. So we want our grub screws pointing upwards or downwards because it's upside down, with our little gauge in there, axles pushed to the right because of our imaginary washer. So you would think it's 6 and 6. I'm going to make a guess that that should be at 6. And that is at 6 as well. And then just pinch tight. grub screws. And that should be our engine gauged upside down. There we go. Just zoomed out again and got a bit of track. So what we're going to do now is put our chassis and wheels on, or not, on the rails. Now the reason for doing this now is we want to make sure, one, that it rolls nicely, but also that it's not running on 3 wheels corner to corner rather than all 4. But because we've been really careful in checking it as we've gone along, we've done it quite nicely. I'll sit more like that when it goes round. I'm not going to spend 10 minutes now rolling that one back and forward. That would be very inappropriate and a very boring video, but I could quite happily roll that back and forward. It makes me very happy. I've had a few minutes rolling that up and down on the rails because it makes me very happy how smooth it flows. I know it's sad, but I'm not ashamed. We'll call it that for this video. I'm now going to put this on a build frame to take to Elsa car, but you'll see that on our next video. Thank you very much for joining us. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, and we will see you next time. Thanks ever so much.